Okay, we're going to wrap up our week on obedience. And today I want to talk to you about it is your choice whether you're going to be a slave or not. Of course I don't want to be a slave, sister. All right, but you know what? Your choices determine whether you're a slave or you're not. So Romans 16, we're going to see it in two different versions today. First, we'll look in the NLT, and it says, "Don't you realize that you become the slave to whatever you decide to obey?" You know, I don't think sometimes we do realize that, but we do. We become a slave to whatever we decide to obey. Okay? You can be a slave to sin, or you can choose to obey God, which leads to righteous living. Well, I could stop there, and I think most of us could realize it makes a lot more sense to choose to obey God than choose to be a slave to sin. But let's look at it in the Passion Translation. It makes it so clear. It says, "Don't you realize that grace frees you to choose your own master?" You get to choose, friend, because grace that Jesus paid for, that grace, he gave that so that we can freely choose our own master. All right, let's go on. But choose carefully. Choose carefully. For you surrender yourself to become a servant, bound to the one that you choose to obey. Whoever you choose, you're going to be bound to them. You're going to have to obey them. All right? If you choose to live sin, it will become your master, and it will own you. It will own you, and it will reward you in death. And many of you don't realize that. Maybe you're young, maybe you haven't lived a whole long time. But you know what? When you give your life over to sin and it becomes your master, you may think, "Oh, this is fun. I'm enjoying it. Nothing bad's happened to me so far." You know what? It owns you. And you won't be long before you realize that you have lost the freedom to make your own choices because you're a slave to that. You become addicted to it. You become bound to it. Okay, let me keep going. But if you choose to love and obey God, he will lead you into perfect righteousness. What I want to say is, even if you have made the choice to let sin be your master and you're a slave to sin, you don't have to stay a slave to sin. That's the wonderful thing. When Jesus died on the cross, he broke every power of the enemy to keep you as a slave to sin. So the good news I have for you is, even if you chose before today to be a slave to sin and that sin was your master, whatever that would look like, whatever addiction, whatever lifestyle choice, it doesn't have to stay that way. Jesus paid for your freedom. You can ask Jesus to set you free, and he will. Deuteronomy 30 says, "Life and death, blessing and cursing, I've set it in front of you." It's your choice. Choose life. You know, when our children were small, we taught them first-time obedience because we felt like it was so important that they would obey the first time. Not so that we could be in control and dictate and show off how great our kids are, although I love our kids and I feel like we have amazing kids. We're so blessed. But you know why? So that it wasn't like, "Please, okay, I'm going to count to 3. Okay, if you don't do this now," that's not teaching them first-time obedience. Okay, we explained when we tell you the first time you need to obey. Because why? We're setting up a pattern in their hearts to quickly obey. And if they can quickly obey us, then they can quickly obey God. Parents, you should be setting the standard of first-time obedience in your own life. Lead by example. Friend, don't be a slave to sin. Choose God. Obey his commandments. He wants to give you a life of perfect righteousness. Today, it's in front of you. Life and death, blessing and cursing. Choose life.